Hey, so I know the title of this video might imply that this is just going to be an overly negative and hyper cynical video of me just kind of complaining about the MCU and everything it does and everything it ever has done and how it's going to ruin everything that I love in my whole life. Which it is kind of that. It is pretty cynical, but it's not all that. I do really love these characters and I am cautiously excited to see them. I just have a lot of concerns, and I think most of you, especially, hopefully, after this video is over, can understand where those concerns come from. And I hope I can kind of show you where that fear is, where it comes from, and how it's not entirely unfound. Alright, now that I've covered my ass from being cyberbullied, let's get into the actual video. So, in the distant past of 2019, our corporate overlord, Disney, bought 20th Century Fox. And while everyone in the world was worried that, a monopoly in the entertainment industry was forming right in front of our eyes, there were a fair share of weirdos who could only think about the X-Men and the Fantastic Four joining the MCU. And this guy was one of those weirdos. I'm a bit of a sucker, I'm not gonna lie. I like the X-Men, I like the Fantastic Four, I like the MCU, so like putting them all together, that makes me happy. Maybe. I hope it makes me happy. If it's done right, it'll make me happy. Look, the Fantastic Four and the X-Men are some of my favorite Marvel teams, and definitely some of my favorite characters that the company has ever published. So the idea of finally being able to see them interact in the larger MCU is honestly kind of exciting. Specifically going into the Fantastic Four today, I really love them and their family dynamic and their stories in general. And honestly, they're some of Marvel's most important characters in their entire publication history. I mean, the MCU honestly doesn't feel whole or complete without them. So it came to no one's surprise when Mr. Kevin will wear a baseball cap to your funeral Feige announced in 2019 that a new Fantastic Four movie that was going to be set in the MCU was coming out at some point. And initially I was overjoyed. The MCU was now able to use characters like Galactus, Silver Surfer, Doctor Doom, and just the family themselves. But then I thought about it more, and the MCU was able to use characters like Galactus, Silver Surfer, Doctor Doom, and just the family themselves. Now, I'm not saying that the MCU is going to completely screw over the Fantastic Four and all of their associated characters. I mean, it's really hard to get worse than Fant Four Stick. That movie is utterly dreadful. Just literally nothing is enjoyable about that movie. But just because the MCU can't get any worse than this doesn't mean that it's going to be good by any means. Far from it. I think part of the reason why I'm so worried about the MCU really nailing home their adaptation of the Fantastic Four is because they have had a really rough time outside of comics. I think most people who don't read comics think that the team are just kind of boring and lame because they haven't really had anything outside of comics that hasn't been boring and lame. The 94 film never released and was just some weird tax write-off or some weird excuse to hold on to the film rights or something. And I'll be fair, the 2000 films certainly have their moments. Far from perfect, far from great, but they have their moments to shine. And Fant Four Stick is Fant Four Stick, so yeah. Not to mention, outside of films, the Fantastic Four haven't really shown up in anything. Their animated and video game appearances have been really, really lackluster or non-existent in anything. I mean, they got kicked out of the Lego games after the first one. You telling me Lego Marvel Superheroes 2 can have Koi Boy, but not Mr. Fantastic? I mean, I know why they're not in there, but fucking Koi Boy? Really? Something I think Disney really needs to recognize and rectify is the fact that the Fantastic Four are incredibly important to Marvel, and they really need to treat them with respect. Without the Fantastic Four's success in 1961, we wouldn't really have Marvel as we know it. They really laid the blueprint for everything. No Fantastic Four kind of means no Marvel. And besides that, they're just great characters with amazing stories that just genuinely deserve to be properly adapted. And look, again, I'm not saying the MCU will completely screw up the Fantastic Four and its associated villains. I mean, you can't get much worse than turning Galactus into a fucking cloud. Again, whatever the hell this movie was in its entirety. But we can certainly get something incredibly mediocre. And let me tell you, nobody does mediocre like the MCU. Phase 4 so far has definitely been wonky, to say the least. And a lot of the problems that people have been having with it, I think I've been there from the beginning. Phases 1, 2, and 3 had their fair share of rushed stories, bad writing, mischaracterizations, and lack of knowledge or lack of respect for the source material. And I think two of the most recent modern examples of that have to be Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel. Oh my god. It is like a spit in the face with what they do to those characters. Moon Knight's obsession with removing any and all street level aspects of the character to avoid even the thought of you comparing Moon Knight to Batman, turning a part of his dissociative identity disorder into a really cool, ooh, look, get excited, look at this post-credit scene. You know, we took a part of his mental illness, we turned it into a cool post-credit scene to tease another season. And also, it's damn near erasure of Mark Spector's Jewish heritage, along with Ms. Marvel's fundamental changing of the powers that completely remove a really cool and interesting aspect of her journey and learning to accept herself for the sole reason of we want to spin it off into more movies and more shows. Also, this was written and partly filmed right before the Ms. Marvel finale, so spoilers for the Ms. Marvel finale, but they turned Kamala Khan into a fucking mutant? But I think these two examples, Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel, highlight a really important issue. The MCU is so willing to change things for really arbitrary reasons, just so they can, make more content? They're willing to totally ruin a key part of the character's fundamental journey so they can make another season of a show, or they can turn it into a spin-off movie. They compromise key and integral aspects to the characters and their stories just to throw it in the machine, just so they can put it in there, make whatever garbage they want, throw it out. And then we all eat it up like fucking parasites. It's essentially what we are, huh? Alright, so if this looks a little bit different than the rest of the video, sorry about that. From here on out, I filmed this part at a different date than the other one. I washed the shirt though, so I can still get a little bit of consistency. But yeah, if the lighting looks just a tiny bit different, then that's why. And also my mouth is blue. I had a blue icy. I was gonna wash it down just so my mouth wasn't blue, but then I was like, you know what, it's the Fantastic Four. They're blue, my mouth is blue, it's perfect. Alright, I don't want this to seem like me bitching and complaining. Oh no, it's not a one-to-one adaptation of the precious comic books. Look, I have no problem with changes being made to the source material in order to better suit the story that is being told right then and there. I think a key example of this would be the whole MCU Mandarin situation. We got the whole twist of just the actor playing the role of an international terrorist with Iron Man 3, but then down the road we got the real Mandarin, Wenwu in Shang-Chi, and they totally revamped that character from the comics. Hell, he doesn't even go by Mandarin anymore. He's a totally different character with totally different motives, but they still kept what made the character cool. What do we like about the Mandarin? Why did we want to see him in a movie? He's a Chinese warlord, he's leader of the 10 Rings, and he has 10 rings that do sick as fuck shit. And Wenwu marks all of those. He's a Chinese warlord, leader of the 10 Rings, and he has 10 rings that do cool shit. That is a perfect example of changes being made to suit the story that work well. And I'm gonna dog on it again. I know. I'm sorry. No, I'm not. Fuck Moon Knight. Moon Knight changed the story of a deep dive into the psyche of a man who is desperately unwell and really, really, really needs mental help. They changed this really interesting and intricate story to examine the point of view of this Jewish man raised in a society post-World War II into just weird clips that make for good crackhead energy compilations on YouTube. And British man dicking around. That's what we fucking got. They changed so much of the source material, and they didn't do anything with that. They changed it for the worse because we didn't get anything that made Moon Knight really cool. What makes Moon Knight a cool character is seeing that deep dive into his psyche and what made him tick. And they totally changed that. And not only did they change it, they didn't really go into it that much. Or at least not as much as you would hope they would, in favor of Godzilla kaiju battles in Egypt. Fun. But yeah, when you make a change for the worse, I'm not gonna be overly thrilled, and I'm not gonna have the most confidence in any future changes that they will make. Alright, now I can totally conceive that I could very well be being overly harsh and overly critical, especially since we know practically nothing about this movie. All we know is that there is an MCU Fantastic Four film coming out at some point. Probably 2024, but we don't know for sure. We know next to nothing. There have been a fair share of leaks and rumors and all that, and I can't personally speak on the validity of any of those. I'm not really sure how credible any of those are. Some of them seem a little far-fetched, but whatever. However, there is one rumor, leak, whatever it technically is, that I do want to speak on right now. Potential spoilers for She-Hulk in 3, 2, 1. Frogman solos Goku, but the recent rumor leak for She-Hulk is that Jason Segel will be playing the Thing in She-Hulk, obviously. I don't know why I said it that many times. Just She-Hulk's on my mind, I guess. But I really like that casting, and I really hope it is true. Jason Segel would make for an amazing Ben Grimm, I feel. The Thing is easily one of Marvel's most friendly, down-to-earth, caring, compassionate, just outright just pal vibes. I don't know how else to put it. He's just one of the most lovable characters in the whole company. And I really think Segel can pull that off really well. He can totally pull off the whole friendly, he's got your best interest at heart, and if he ever sees that you're down, he's going to take you out to have a good time. He can really pull that off, and I think that is an important aspect of the Thing's character to get. Now, another important aspect is that the Thing is quite intimidating and imposing, and while that's certainly not anything Segel is particularly known for, I do still think he can pull it off, and I would love to see him give it a shot. I mean, comedy actors seem to really have this great knack for playing serious and kind of scary roles at times, and well, I mean, he's a comedy actor. I think he could really do it. And I would love to see that happen. Plus, Jason Segel is Jewish. That's a major plus factor. I really think that the Thing, whoever ends up playing him, should be played by a Jewish actor. I mean, he was totally modeled after Jack Kirby, you know, a very famous Jewish creator. And plus, the Thing is one of Marvel's, I would say, 3 most prominent Jewish characters. Ben Grimm, Magneto, and Moon Knight. And they already kind of dropped the ball on Moon Knight. So, thing in Magneto they really, really, really have to get right. So I would love to see that. And hopefully we can actually dive more into Ben's character and we can actually kind of see what being Jewish means to him as a person. That would be great. I feel like I'm not asking for a lot, but evidently I am. I will never let it go. What the fuck, Moon Knight? You had like 2 jobs and you fucked up like 3 of them. Speaking of casting, I have to address the big-eared elephant in the room. I'm sorry. That's kind of mean. He's a much more handsome man than myself. John Jim Halpert and CIA Dick Ryder himself, Krasinski, recently got the role of Reed Richards in at least a small cameo appearance in Multiverse of Madness. And I'm not personally into it. I mean, he's been a really popular fan cast for a couple of years now, and it was so popular that they confirmed it. That was the whole reason why he appeared as Reed in Multiverse of Madness. This singular piece of fan art right here has had more of an impact on society than I have had in my entire life. Look, personally, I'm not really a fan of John Krasinski as Reed. I just really don't think he can pull off Mr. Fantastic. And whenever I hear arguments as to why he would make a good Mr. Fantastic, it always seems to come down to the most surface level and superficial arguments. It's like, oh, he's a white dude with brown hair and a big beard, and he's married to an actress who is a blonde white woman. So she kind of looks like Sue and he kind of looks like Reed. And their characters are married, and they're married in real life, and they're both actors, so they would be perfect. Like, they're kind of a package deal, right? It'd be weird if we only got one and not the other. And while I think Emily Blunt would make for a fine enough Sue Storm, I don't think casting her as Sue is worth it if we're gonna get Krasinski as Reed, and we kind of have to get them both, right? Like, I'm not a fan of that casting, but like, if we're gonna get one, give us both of them. It's kind of like half the point of casting one of them. Look, I'm not calling Krasinski a bad actor or anything. He's a fine enough actor. I've seen him in a bunch of stuff, and I like him in that stuff. He's fine, but I just really don't see him as a good fit for Reed. From what I've seen, he kind of only has a couple different modes. It's funny, sarcastic guy, and cool action hero. And cool action hero, but he's a DILF. Reed Richards is such an interesting and complex character that is so fundamentally different from anyone else we've gotten in the MCU that not only am I worried that they're going to MCU-ify him by making him tell jokes and quips every 5 seconds, but I'm also worried that they're going to miscast him with someone who doesn't really understand the character, or at least doesn't portray that understanding of the character. Reed Richards is a scientist first and foremost. He's the goddamn smartest man alive, and you should always know that. When you have a conversation with Reed, you shouldn't feel good about yourself. You should feel dumb, just simply talking to him. And not in the sense of Tony Stark putting you down and telling jokes at your expense that make you feel stupid. He's not gonna do that, but he's just simply talking to him. You're gonna really feel the intelligence. He's on such a different level. Like, Reed is here, and everyone else that you consider smart in the Marvel Universe is like here. Reed should feel like he's on that different level. He's just on that different plane. But being on that different plane isn't always a good thing. Because Reed is a scientist, first and foremost, his heart and his head are oftentimes in very different places. His heart might lie with his family at the end of the day, but his head is oftentimes elsewhere. Just thinking about, I don't know, nerd shit. Solving the world of all of its problems, making a groundbreaking discovery at every opportunity, just whatever. He's like a classic Disney Channel movie dad. Always at work and most of the time ignoring and neglecting his family. Not because he doesn't love them, but because he's so wrapped up in his work. Reed has that kind of bug, that urge, that little man on his shoulder, that little devil always telling him to push the boundaries, go farther, fix the world, use science to your advantage and make these groundbreaking discoveries. That's not always a good thing because a lot of the times, Reed will put the world in just as much jeopardy as he saves it. Being the smartest man alive does not mean that you are never dumb. And I think Reed is a perfect example of that. That little devil on his shoulder really gets to him and really pushes him in some really devious and quite questionable actions a lot of the time. I'm not saying we go full Civil War Marvel Zombies. Please, for the love of God, don't do that. But capture that side of the character. He's not perfect. He's not even always good. That's important. But even though Reed can sometimes be a morally questionable figure, he's not a bad guy, and he's not a total evil megalomaniac level scientist. He's not Dr. Doom for one very specific reason. He has his family. Remember when I said that Reed's mind and his heart are in different places? His mind might be with that devil on his shoulder, but his heart is with his family, and his heart is full of love for his family. Everything he does is to help them at the end of the day. Even if it doesn't seem like it, even if he kind of strays off that path, he will go back. He will learn. He will help protect his family at the end of the day. And he loves his family at the end of the day. Reed's whole desire to fix things and be perfect and not mess up is because of his deeply rooted fear of failure. And it's not totally unfounded. Mr. Fantastic failed his family once before, and it totally changed the trajectory of their entire lives forever. I mean, he turned his best friend into a horribly disfigured rock man. Permanently. I mean, not permanently, but like, you know what I mean. Permanently. Semi-permanent. As permanent as comic books get. Reed Richards' deeply rooted fear of failure and his total love for his family are what totally drive this character as a person. And we need to really understand that, and we really need to get both sides of that. You can't sacrifice that morally questionable side of the character just for the whole family angle, and vice versa. You can't totally remove his love for his family just to make him a megalomaniac and just a total mad scientist. That's the Maker. That's Doom. They're dark reflections of Reed Richards as a person. That's why they're interesting villains, but that's not the main Reed Richards. And look, I understand that Krasinski didn't really have all the time in the world to shine as Mr. Fantastic. He was only in the movie for give or take 2 minutes, and most of that time was him being brutally murdered. However, I could say the exact same thing about Anson Mount's Black Bolt. The key difference is that I absolutely loved Mount's Black Bolt. He gave an absolutely incredible performance as Blackagar Boltagon. I will never not laugh at that name. Greatest name in all of fiction. Mount really captured Black Bolt in that short period of time, and I really hope that we get to see him as the mainline Black Bolt. Side note, again, spoilers for Ms. Marvel. Ain't no way we ever seeing the Inhumans again. Oh my god. While Krasinski might not be my favorite pick for the role, personally, Glenn Howerton or William Jackson Harper would be perfect in my opinion, though I am totally open for some other suggestions and other castings. I do hope that if Krasinski does get the role, he at least considers what some people have been saying, and I do hope that he can really maybe rethink the character from the ground up and maybe recontextualize it for the film. And while for Invisible Woman and Human Torch, I don't really have anyone in mind, personally, for the castings, though for Human Torch, I do think they should get someone relatively close to Tom Holland's age. That way we can hopefully get that classic friendship between Spider-Man and Human Torch on the big screen. Just think that would be really cool. And for the classic Johnny Storm cockiness, there's a bunch of actors who can totally pull that off. I'm not really picky, just someone around that age would be great. And for the Invisible Woman, they definitely have to get someone who can kind of nail that motherly, compassionate, caring, warm, comforting feel of the character, while also getting the holy fucking shit, did you just touch my kid? I'm gonna put a force field in your head and blow you up from the inside out. We should get both sides of her. They're both pretty important. The warmth and comfort of Sue, while also the overprotective and sometimes overbearing nature of her, are pretty important, as she is kind of the glue that holds the family together. And a lot of the time, she's the only one who is actively trying to keep them together, especially when they have their differences. And it is really frustrating when that side of her isn't really acknowledged, and she's just kind of written to be arm candy for Reed or motivation for him when she cheats on him or flirts with Namor or something. Another thing the MCU absolutely has to get right is the fact that this is, you know, the Fantastic Four. All four of them are equally important as another and play an equal part to the family and team dynamic. These characters all have an insane amount of depth and are all really interesting in their own right, and they all need to be explored and properly fleshed out. You can't just sideline a member just because they seem a little less interesting on the surface level. You hear that, Dan Slott? You can't do that. Look, I understand that in one movie we can't perfectly flesh out all four of these characters an equal amount and give them all the depth that they all deserve, but these characters aren't going to be around for just one movie. It's the MCU. They're going to be here for the long haul, and I think that's really important to note. Team-ups, crossovers, you know, that's all going to happen. We're going to see more of the characters in that. But for the main Fantastic Four solo ventures, I think a quadrilogy of films, each one focusing on a different member of the team, would be perfect. Obviously, all four of them are going to have a high level of importance in each film, but I think picking one member and specifically having them as the emotional core for each film would be a really smart way to go about it and would be a really great way of giving us an insight to each member. Complete side note, totally irrelevant, they should all have different costumes than the one that Mr. Fantastic had in MULTIVERSE Madness. I'm a firm believer that the MCU over-designs the fuck out of a lot of their suits, and holy black lines, this is one of the most prime examples of that. Personally, I think a great way to give us that more simplified and aesthetically pleasing suit, while also acknowledging that these are scientists first and foremost and explorers, would be to give us like modified astronaut type suits. I think that would be amazing, and I think that'd be really clever. I really hope they kind of go in that direction, but I'm definitely not counting on it. Look, I know this video might come across as me kind of being overly cynical and just kind of like, oh no, they're gonna ruin my favorite characters. I hope they don't do that, but I don't want it to be that, even though it kind of already is that for the most part. It's mostly me just bitching and whining, but I mean, that's what most people do on the internet, is just bitch and whine, so I think you can bear with me for these couple minutes. I don't want this video to be me saying the MCU Fantastic Four is going to be shit, no matter what, and it's never going to live up to my expectations. I do kind of have high expectations, but I really don't think that's unwarranted. This is Disney. They have all the money in the world, and they have all the resources in the world. We are totally capable of getting a good, proper Fantastic Four movie from them, and good adaptations of these characters and these stories. It is totally possible for them. But I don't really know if they're gonna do that. I don't know if the MCU is capable of doing that, and that's what this is about. I am still, albeit very, very cautiously, excited for the MCU Fantastic Four. I'm still pretty excited to see some of my favorite characters finally enter this film franchise. I know, my brain is rotting a little bit. I should learn from the heartbreak that this stupid cinematic universe causes me on such a frequent basis, but it's like a toxic relationship. I'm always gonna come back for more, and I'm always gonna be a bit like, well, maybe they'll change this time. But maybe they will change this time. Hopefully. My eyesight melted. This is my outro, I guess. I don't know. I didn't write something down. I didn't write this part. I definitely should have written something for this, but I didn't, because I'm a bit dumb. I'm sure you could tell. But yeah, is outro, I guess. Twitter, Instagram, follow me there, please, because I desperately crave attention online that I did not receive in my youth. So that would really help me out there.